Hey guys, my name is Adam. I just completed a 6-month solo backpacking trip in these 12 countries, and I stayed in hostels 99% of the time. There's a ton of stuff I wish I knew about hostels before I started my trip, so I'm gonna try to break everything down into 6 categories: layout and amenities, food and dining, friends and social life, safety, hostel etiquette, and finally, things to bring. And if you wanna skip to any of these sections, here are the links to each category. And I want to mention too that everyone has vastly different experiences while traveling, and the purpose of this video is to share my experiences and advice in the most candid way possible. When I set out for my first major solo backpacking trip, I didn't really know what to expect from hostels, especially in some of the third world countries that I was planning to visit. Now I know there are many avenues you can take to see the world. You can volunteer, teach English, or use one of the many work exchange sites. But if you're just starting out, hostels are an absolute blessing. They're affordable, they require very little commitment, and they can really help usher you into a country you know little to nothing about. I remember when I first arrived in Vietnam, I stayed in a small hotel. I didn't meet any other foreigners. There weren't that many English speakers. I didn't know where to go or what to see. So after those first few nights in the hotel, I moved to a hostel. I was immediately surrounded by English speakers and other travelers. I found activities on a bulletin board. I took like a guided tour the first morning that I was at the hostel, and I ended up finding like a core group of friends that I experienced the rest of Vietnam with. So I used Skyscanner to book all my flights, and I used Hostelworld or Booking.com to book my hostel accommodation. And sometimes you can even go to the hostel's website and get a little bit of a cheaper rate than on Hostelworld and Booking.com. All right, so let's start with the layout. What does a hostel even look like? So usually you're gonna have 8 to 12 person shared accommodation. You can get a private room, but it's more common to do the 8 to 12 person. They have co-ed dorms, and they also have private all-female dorms as well. So the beds are usually twin-size bunk beds. And if I can, I'll try to get a bottom bunk. There's a couple reasons for that. It's easier to get into at night. You can sit on the bed to put your shoes on and reorganize your stuff, and you're kind of shielded from the overhead light should someone turn it on late at night, which does happen. With all that being said, I've had the top bunk many a times, and it's no big deal. And I try to look for hostels with a small privacy curtain for the bottom bunk, an outlet for you to charge your phone, and a small light by the bed. And these amenities are becoming more and more common. For instance, my hostel in Bali was less than $10 a night, and it had all 3 of these things. You'll also need to do your laundry throughout your trip, and luckily almost every hostel I stayed at came equipped with a washer and dryer. Usually for a small fee, you can buy detergent and you can use the washer and dryer. Some places will even do your laundry for you and give it to you in a package. This was 2 kilos of laundry that cost about $6 in Vietnam. Bathrooms are usually shared, but in my experience, they do a really good job of keeping the facilities clean. There's always been a shower, and sometimes they even have shampoo and conditioner in the shower for you to use. I will say that the water's not always heated, but they've always had a shower, and I would recommend wearing flip-flops in those showers, but we'll talk about that a little bit more when we get to what to bring. Okay, so the next category is food and dining. One of the nicest things I realized about hostels is a lot of times they'll offer a free breakfast. That's fairly common, and some places even offer some form of dinner or community dinner. For Spain, for instance, they had a community dinner every night, and one of the hostel workers was selected to cook a meal for everybody. When I was in Italy, for instance, they had a cooking class where we could all get involved in. We all made pasta together, and it was a way for us to socialize, but also the hostel was providing food, and that's fairly common. Many hostels will have a fully equipped kitchen with utensils. All you have to do is buy the food and bring it and cook it. Most places will have a label and a marker for you to mark all of your stuff in the fridge or in the pantry, and never once has anybody eaten my food while it was in the fridge or in the common space pantry. Sometimes there's even a free box for travelers to contribute to, so when you leave and go to another country, your food doesn't go to waste. Meanwhile, in Southeast Asia, food was so cheap that I rarely cooked. There often isn't a kitchen. There's more like a restaurant in the hostel. It might be a couple dollars more expensive than what you'd find like on the street at a restaurant, but you're paying for the convenience. And if you go out onto the street, it could be $2 to $3 per meal. It's really inexpensive, so there's really no need to cook. Also, I want to add that I was surprised to find that many of the countries in Southeast Asia didn't have grocery stores. And besides, the food is like part of the experience, and you'd be at a loss if you didn't go and eat the local food. So let's get into the next category, friends and social life. So I set off on my backpacking trip completely alone, and I remember feeling really uneasy in the weeks before my departure about the prospect of finding friends while I was traveling. I wanted to see the world, but I didn't want to end up feeling isolated during my experience. I was amazed to find just how easy it is to make friends in hostels. There's usually a common space or bar, and if you sit out in that area, you're bound to meet somebody. I joined joined walking tours and organized activities from the hostels. I met people at breakfast. I met people while I was just hanging out in my room. I met people everywhere. So I'll give a couple examples of this. When I was in Singapore, they had a scooter tour from the hostel. We all got these rented scooters and went 4 hours around the city. And by the time we got back, there was like a really good rapport with the group. I joined a winery tour in Italy and I met a lot of people through that. In Japan, the hostel hosted a kimono class where they put the traditional kimono on us. I met a lot of cool people from that experience. I met a tuk-tuk driver in Cambodia who drove me places, and he ended up taking me back with his family, and I got to experience his friends.
Hello, welcome in Cambodia.
And in Vietnam, I was taking a small hostel tour that was put on by the hostel. I met a group that I later would do a 7-day bike tour with in Vietnam. So just get involved in all of the things that are coming from the hostel. Okay, so let's talk safety. When it comes to your belongings, it's best to keep your stuff locked up or on your person at all times. Every hostel that I visited had a pretty big lockbox for your stuff. You just have to bring the lock. I even met a traveler who would lock his bag up and then chain it to something stationary in the room with a bike lock. That way he knew his stuff was secured no matter what the environment was. That's a pretty extreme example, but at the end of the day, he was sure that all of his stuff was secured at all times. And throughout my entire trip, I never had anything stolen, but it's important to just be mindful of your stuff. If you're a solo female traveler, you'll be happy to know that a lot of women choose to opt for the mixed gender dorms. But if you want, there's oftentimes a all-female dorm, and you could even get like a private room with your own lock and key if you feel more comfortable with that. So if you're traveling to a third world country, it's not a bad idea to get a routine checkup and make sure you're up to date on all your vaccinations. Some rural developing countries haven't completely eliminated rabies. You don't expect to be bitten by a dog or a bat while you're traveling, but it's cheap and accessible to get a rabies vaccine. Again, mosquito repellent is good to have for Southeast Asia, and you can take anti-malaria pills in the weeks leading up to your trip. Come to think of it, maybe I should have taken some of these precautions before I went on my trip, but hey, hindsight's 2020. Lastly, I wanted to mention motorbike rentals. A lot of hostels will allow you to rent a motorbike for $5 to $10 a day, and it can give you a lot more freedom to see the sights you want to see on your own time without relying on transportation or a taxi. While they do give you a huge degree of freedom, there's no shortage of injured Westerners limping around in Southeast Asia because they crashed their motorbike. It's a super common scenario. You don't want to be one of those people, but do be mindful of the locals, and it is their road. Wear a helmet. Maybe a small med kit wouldn't be a bad idea, and you'll be totally fine. Generally speaking, hostels are extremely safe, but trust your intuition, and if you choose to drink, just be mindful. So the next category is hostel etiquette. So hostels are all about shared spaces, so it's important to have respect for your host and the people around you. When you first arrive to your room, it's not a bad idea to quickly introduce yourself, even if you have plans to go explore the country during the day. Take a brief second to get acquainted by asking simple questions like their nationality, age, how long they've been traveling, and what they plan to see in the country. So there's usually only one main overhead light in each of the hostels, so try to only use that during the daytime. I remember when I was in Spain, people came in at 3 o'clock and they turned that light on and left it on for a while. If you can, try to keep that light on only during the daytime, or use the light by the hostel bed or the light from your phone. If there's a window in the room, I like to shut the blinds the night before so that a lot of light doesn't come in the morning. Inevitably, people will be leaving early for flights or for tours or whatever else. So what I like to do is get all my stuff packed and ready to go the night before. That way I don't have to open bags and rustle through stuff, and that way I also don't need to use a light in the day. And if I do need to use a light late at night, again, the little flashlight that comes on your phone is perfect. So alarms. A lot of people use alarms to make sure they make their flight or whatever adventure they have in the morning, but try to be as courteous as you can with the alarms. I remember when I was in Japan, someone's alarm went off at 7, and it went off for about 10 or 15 minutes until everybody in the room was awake. And then eventually the girl whose alarm was going off came in from the shower, and she didn't realize that she had left it out. So just try to be as courteous as you can with alarms, but it is part of the shared dorm experience. It happens and it's no big deal. If you meet someone and you want to get together, get a private room. I remember when I first got to Cambodia, I had a 4-person shared dorm, and right when I came in, a couple were having sex. Just not cool. It's not hostel etiquette. Spend the extra money and get a private room. It goes without saying, but don't steal. There's a communal vibe to hostels, and it would be a shame to break that unwritten rule. At the same time, don't give anybody an opportunity to steal your stuff. secure everything before you leave the hostel or have it secured on your person. So my last tip for this category is to make sure you have your hostel booked before you enter the next country. When you talk to customs, they'll want to know the address or the phone number of the place you're staying. That's what you'll tell the taxi driver once you get to the next airport anyways. And also sometimes they'll want to even know which flight you have booked to leave the country. And this especially applies to places with a 30 or 90-day visa. That brings us to our final category, things to bring. Now this isn't a complete and comprehensive list, but I'll try to cover some of the less obvious things that don't always get mentioned. So you'll want to have a small padlock, and small enough that it can fit on all the different type of lockers you'll encounter. And I also like to have a combination lock without a key so that there's no risk of me losing the key. A travel adapter for all the different outlets you'll encounter. Flip-flops are really good to have for the shower and around the hostel. A bag with wheels is really useful. I completely overpacked for my trip. I had a bag with wheels, and I remember in Japan, both the wheels broke off, and I ended up having to drag it / carry it 2 kilometers to the final bus station. If there's one thing I could have done differently, it would have been pack a little bit lighter. One of my friends did 3 months in Japan, all with one backpack. That'll also save you money when you're going country to country on the plane because you won't have to pay for luggage. And at the end of the day, you have to carry all your belongings around with you, and it's a lot of strain on your body. It's also a good idea to have a photo and digital copy of your passport and ID. The last thing you want is to be stuck in a country with an expired visa. So a couple other notable mentions. A lot of people like to have a quick dry towel. I had a towel and I still use the hostel's towel 75% of the time. Either they provided one for free or it was for a small fee. Noise canceling headphones can be really good to have. You'll be traveling a lot in planes, trains, and buses. And it's also nice to be able to have some noise canceling headphones for the hostel dorm itself. A portable battery pack or power bank was really good to have while I was traveling because oftentimes my phone was my map or lifeline back to the hostel. So having a battery pack at all times in case my phone died was essential. Again, mosquito repellent is really good to have for Asia, and I always had a bottle of hand sanitizer on me. One of the strategies that really helped me stay organized while I was traveling is separating all my clothing into separate bags. I had one plastic bag for pants, one for shirts, one for socks, and that way I didn't have to sort through a mess of clothing to find the clothing I needed for the day. It was all right there for me. So there you have it. That's everything I wish I would have known about hostels before I started my solo backpacking trip. And I hope these best practices help you plan out your journey. If you like this video, hit the like button, and if you want to see more of this type of content, subscribe to my channel. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.